Hello, my name is Khan Bayoud, and today at ResistTV we're going to talk about the issue that on February 7th, Department of Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly suggested that there will be a policy that requires people coming into the United States to provide passwords to their Facebook, Twitter, and other social media accounts for them to be allowed to access the United States of America. This is an issue that has far broader impact on the United States as a country and international relations in general. Today, to speak about this issue, we have with us Greg Nojeim. He's a senior counsel and director of the Freedom, Security, and Technology Project at the Center for Democracy and Technology, a DC nonprofit. Mr. Nojeim, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Khan.
Greg, your organization is part of a broad coalition of dozens of human rights, civil liberties, trade, and technology groups protesting this policy. Please tell us what impact this proposal would have on people, and what are the implications of the policy being reproduced elsewhere, say in other countries, for example.
It's incredibly invasive. You know, it's one thing for the government to say, well, we want to know what your social media handle is, to see what you've said publicly about terrorism or other things that might make you inadmissible to the United States. That in itself is intrusive, but this idea that the government would actually collect passwords from people entering the United States is probably one of the worst border control ideas that I've heard in my 30 years of working on these issues. The security agencies, businesses, everyone who gives a person permission to access information says, use a password, make it strong, don't share it with anyone. And now we've got the government saying, in order to get into the country, we want all your passwords so we can see what you've been saying privately. What a awful security idea and a terrible idea for privacy.
Do you think this will be an issue if, for example, other countries take a cue from the United States and say, hey, this is a great policy, we should apply it too, and then they may also apply it to United citizens going to those countries?
It's almost certain that other countries will mirror such a requirement. I'm in the middle of applying for a visa to go to Brazil right now. The reason the Brazilian visa is expensive and the reason the Brazilian visa requires that I do a number of things like submit a picture and other information is because they mirror the requirements of the countries when their nationals are going to the country. So other countries do that as well. So one could expect an American going to Brazil or another country would now be asked for his password to social media accounts if the United States imposes this requirement. And again, for that American, think about giving up your passwords to foreign governments just in order to travel. It's going to depress travel because people know they can't trust what the foreign government is going to do with their information.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point. So the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution protects U.S. citizens against unreasonable search and seizure by the government. However, the Fourth Amendment gets a little bit diminished at the point of entry at the borders. Can you tell us how that applies in general when you're coming inside the United States, how your Fourth Amendment protections kind of get lowered?
Yeah, so they do get lowered. And by the way, aliens have Fourth Amendment rights too when they're inside the United States. When they're abroad, they don't. When they're at the border, their rights are diminished as well. Basically, the government has the authority to do a cursory search in order to find contraband and in order to determine whether the person who is presenting him or herself is admissible. What this password requirement does is test how intrusive that what's supposed to be a cursory search can be in order to permit someone to gain access. So for example, say the government thought you were transporting drugs inside a body cavity. Could it just force you to endure a search at the border? No. Those are very intrusive searches, and the courts have said for that kind of search, the government's going to need a warrant. This password demand is, in a sense, the electronic equivalent, because behind the password everything that you want secret, everything that you're not publishing to the world. So we would say that that first, passwords shouldn't be demanded of travelers. It's a very bad security practice. And information that a person has kept private shouldn't be demanded as a condition of entry. Rather, that search has to be a very cursory surface search. And by the way, it shouldn't be done on everyone. It shouldn't be done with no suspicion. There should have to be at least reasonable suspicion for the government to open up your laptop and see what you might have on your home screen.
Great, thank you so much for this input. We understand that the government has national security concerns. How do you think the government should balance the interest in preserving national security versus preserving the privacy of U.S. citizens and green card holders or people who are coming to the United States? How should the government, how should it be able to balance these two conflicting interests?
So a good way to balance them is to use the tools that we have in our system of government, the separation of powers, when the search needs to be very intrusive. So if the average person is coming up to the border, you have no suspicion about them, you don't need to do a search, right? You look at the person, there's no suspicion. Why would that person be searched? We don't really have the resources to do that anyway. If there is some reason to be suspicious about the person, then there might be the opening up of the computer to see what's on it. If there's a lot of suspicion about the person, say they have a tip that the person seeking entry into the United States is a child pornographer and that there's child pornography on the computer, well, with that tip, if it gives them the certainty needed, they should go into court and get probable cause, prove it to a judge, and search the computer. Now, at the border, there isn't a lot of time. So in that kind of situation, it might be necessary for the government to detain the computer, to hold it for a time while it obtains that warrant and copies the information that the warrant gives it permission to copy. So again, the way to deal with it is to use our system of protecting people against arbitrary searches and use it at the border, particularly when there needs to be a very intrusive search.
Great, that was very helpful. Do you expect the Congress to weigh in on this issue? What kind of clarity do you think is needed here?
Well, I think Congress may legislate about the kinds of searches of devices that the government can do at the border. In other words, what I just said, that if it's a very intrusive search of the device, the government wants to see what's on the person's computer. It's more than just opening it up and seeing what's on the home screen. I could imagine a member introducing a bill to require a warrant for such a search. The password issue, I think, is more difficult to legislate, but Senator Wyden has indicated an interest in pursuing legislation in that area. He's a Democrat from Oregon, and he's done a lot of work on internet issues, and he'll be listened to. So I think that there will be some movement in Congress. Whether there actually is a bill that passes, well, that's a tall order in any Congress. We'll just have to wait and see.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Gregory Nojeim, Senior Counsel and Director of the Freedom, Security, and Technology Project at the Center for Democracy and Technology. Thank you for your time and making yourself available today.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.